Hi YouTube, it's your friendly neighborhood Natty here. My name is Matthew. I make videos on martial arts and video games. But today we're actually going to talk about the Smith & Wesson Model 3. This is the replica version by Uberti. The Model 3 is kind of the parenthood of the Schofield, which I will talk about as well, even though I don't have the Schofield. The Model 3 was produced from 1870 to 1915, made in a variety of calibers, but we're going to focus on two, particularly 44 Russian and 45 Smith & Wesson or 45 Schofield. Now the 44 Russian was developed in 1870 and it was the world's first modern internally lubricated bullet. Alex Gorloff was a member of the Russian embassy in DC, and he conducted an inquiry to Smith & Wesson about a military contract for the armament of Model 3s for the Russian Army. However, Mr. Gorloff was not a fan of the stock chambering for the Model 3, which was 44 American. It used a heel bullet, much like the 22 LR, which was externally lubricated. He had the belief that with an externally lubricated bullet, it would attract debris, so upon firing, it would do some damage to the bore, which is, it's pretty fair criticism actually. That's pretty fair. So he basically asked Smith & Wesson to make a bullet that was internally lubricated instead. Now Smith & Wesson succeeded in this endeavor by shaving the diameter of the 44 bullet to 429. They increased the bullet weight to 246 grains, and the new round had a muzzle velocity of 750 feet per second, produced about twice the pressure of the 44 American. Now, since both rounds were similar to each other, it is possible where one could mistakenly fire a 44 Russian and a 44 American gun, and so some steps were taken to prevent such a catastrophe. First, the 44 Russian round had a lengthened case, so it wouldn't be able to fit in the 44 American gun, and it also had a tapered cylinder, so it was wide at the back to accept the round, and then it got narrower in the case shoulder to appropriately fit the .429 bullet. Now, Smith & Wesson had apparently almost become insolvent from the Russian military contract. Apparently, the imperial government had tasked their own gunsmiths to reverse engineer the Model 3 design and produce domestic copies of their own at their armory in Tula. Now, to be fair, this is a common practice to be inspired by other people's designs and work. I think it has to do with how unglobalized the world was and the insane hassle that would be involved in trying to pursue someone in a foreign country, abide by the laws of their court. Nowadays we have instant text messaging imagery. Pursuing international copyright is, hardly difficult anymore. And to be fair, we're not blameless. Much like everyone else, we did have a copy of our own of the British Bulldog revolver design. Now, unlike copy designs from China and Brazil, the Russian copies were actually of exceptional quality and, barring import tariffs, considerably cheaper as well. So as you can imagine, the Russian government was very keen on renegotiations, trying to cancel orders or delaying payment for guns that were already delivered. Thankfully, Russia did end up paying for over 130,000 Model 3s. Whether that was the original order, I can't say. Now, the 45 Schofield's history begins with the adoption of the Model 3 and its stock chambering of 44 American for the U.S. Army in 1870. Now, in 1875, Smith & Wesson received a contract to provide armaments for the U.S. Army with Model 3s that had recommended improvements by Major George Schofield. George was a cavalryman, and his improvement was to move the latch from the barrel onto the frame instead. So you can see that here, that the latch that opens the firearm, it's on the barrel, well, the top strap of the barrel, and that is how the gun opens. Okay, and that is how you have to load and unload the gun, is by that top latch. After the first click, it has to open like this. There's really no other way to do it. So George, being a cavalryman, right, if you're holding the horse and you're having the gun, it's very difficult to try to unload this one-handed, right? It's very difficult. You have to let go of the reins to do it. So Mr. Schofield's design change was to move the latch instead from the top strap of the barrel to the frame instead. And what happened there is that you can kind of, that I've seen, and it's, you kind of push in and then push back, and then the gun unlatches, basically. Basically, it's kind of like every cavalryman's dream. Now, originally, Smith & Wesson was supposed to chamber the gun in .45 Colt, which was standard issue at the time. However, Smith could only do .45 Schofield, and .45 Schofield is just a little bit shorter than .45 Colt. Basically, .45 Colt guns can shoot .45 Schofield, but .45 Schofield guns cannot shoot .45 Colt. And the reason being was that because the frame was moved, the frame in general, right, whether it's on the top strap or on the frame, the open brake latch mechanism is a very weak design. It's not meant to take pressures, very high pressures. I know I've shown you guys the Harrington Richardson Sportsman 999, 22 long rifle, hardly a big deal. Most modern top brakes today you'll see in 38 special, so that's kind of the acceptable range. But at the time, .45 Colt was too much pressure for a top brake gun, and so Smith was really limited in having the gun be made in .45 Schofield only, rather than .45 Colt. And that's actually the reason why you've heard me say in the past that the Peacemaker is the gun that won the West, because being a .45 Colt, it's going to be able to shoot both the .45 Colt and the .45 Schofield because it has the longer cylinder, right? But a Schofield, having a shorter cylinder, is only going to be able to take the .45 Schofield and not the .45 Colt. Now, interestingly enough, I do believe that the Army standardized their rounds to be .45 Schofield instead of .45 Colt. And I think the reason why was that he has an elder brother. George had an elder brother, John, and he was kind of like the lead dude in the U.S. Army Ordnance. And so there's kind of a little bit of that politics going on. But it didn't matter because most people, whether it was the Army or civilians, they all chose the .45 Colt Peacemaker because it could shoot both rounds. And of course, worst case scenario, and I'm sure it happened, somebody in the U.S. Army got the wrong ammo. They got the wrong ammo for the wrong gun, and so they just have a bunch of ammo that can't be used. But if they switched over to the Peacemaker, well, you can use both, and now you don't have any leftover ammunition. And that's kind of the story how the Colt Peacemaker beat the Smith & Wesson Schofield. Now to speak about the Model 3 itself, as I said, I think I mistakenly said Uberti. This is actually from Cimarron. Cimarron is the one that makes Model 3. Uberti is the one that had the Schofield. And as I've learned by a $900 mistake, basically the Model 3's latch is on the top strap, and then the Schofield is actually on the frame itself. Now, I know we talked about how the Schofield couldn't be had in .45 Colt back then. This actually is in .45 Colt. You can get the Model 3, you can get the Schofield in .45 Colt. I think it has to do kind of with just better steel. We have better steel production than they would have had back in 1870. For here, I know that they lengthened the cylinders because this can shoot .45 Colt. So that's really the reason why you can get these guns now in .45 Colt, even though cowboys couldn't back then. I also need to mention that even though these guns are chambered in .45 Colt, we're not talking about modern .45 Colt. We're talking about kind of just your regular cowboy load pressures. So I'd say about 750 feet per second is about what you want to be shooting through these guns. If you go any higher than that, that's kind of your own risk. None of Uberti or Cimarron or any Old West makers of Old West guns, nobody ever says you should shoot modern .45 Colt. So that's kind of on you if you do, but it's kind of just well-known knowledge that you really just only shoot low pressure cowboy loads through any modern replica of Old West guns. Now, if you guys don't want to make the same mistake I did, to make sure you get the Schofield if you want the Schofield is that the Model 3s, again, the latch is on the top, not on the frame. It'll sometimes be listed as the first model. You'll see that listed as they'll say Schofield first model, but it's basically a Model 3 first model. And then the Schofield will be the second model. And you'll see pictures that, you know, the Schofield has kind of this kind of funny scoop design, which is where George Schofield kind of had the idea to like push in to unlock the latch instead, just to make sure you get the right one. Another thing I noticed too is that the Cimarron's Model 3 is an 8-inch barrel, and then I know the Uberti Schofield is a 7-inch barrel. So that's another way to tell. And yes, I do plan to sell this and get the right gun. Now I know it's a little anachronistic, but I can verify for you guys that the Model 25 speed loaders, so for the Smith & Wesson Model 25, the double action 45 Colt revolver, those speed loaders work for this gun as well. A little anachronistic, I know, but just to show you. So if we unlock the latch, there you go. And then you have the HKS. This is the 25-5. Basically it's for the Smith & Wesson Model 25. It fits perfectly. So you kind of have to hold the cylinder, but you unlock it, and then the rounds drop in there, and you're good to go. So that's that. That's the presentation for the Cimarron Model 3s. We talk a little bit about the Schofield, but of course I don't have it. I will have it though in the future. That's going to be the end of my Cowboy series. We may revisit some guns, but those are kind of the main ones that came to mind for me. You know, the Peacemaker. Well, I mean, what did we talk about? We talked about the 1860 Army, you know, then Peacemaker, then Schofield, and there's other things like that, I know, but those are kind of the main ones that interested me watching cowboy movies growing up. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked the video. You have a nice day now, and you take care, okay? Bye.
You learned martial arts! Martial arts, good!